Over the years, attitudes towards workers have changed considerably. After all, there was a time when workers had no rights at all and laboured in appalling conditions. Conditions have improved a lot, but conflict in the workplace is still common, and human resources managers nowadays need to be able to deal with it when necessary. What is conflict in the workplace? Definitions vary, but I'm taking it to refer to a whole range of behaviours that the victim finds unacceptable, from minor, harmless arguments to, at the opposite extreme, physical violence. Much of this is covered by the term bullying, by which I mean one or more people behaving abusively or aggressively against another who is in a weaker position. Although all behaviour like this is a form of conflict, not all conflict can be described in these terms. As with all human behaviour, there are numerous reasons for it, but often it's caused by someone who feels the need to show their superiority over someone else, in order to feel that they aren't at the lowest level in a hierarchy or a group of people. In some cases, one person simply dislikes the other, on the basis that the personality of one is in some way incompatible with that of the other person. A general habit of optimism in one person could make them intolerant of a colleague who's constantly pessimistic. Not that that justifies treating them badly, of course. Some conflicts arise when people are more interested in promoting themselves and their team than in the company as a whole. These conflicts are called structural and could come about, for example, when a sales team believe they are the only people in the business who do any useful work and look down on behind-the-scenes administrators. Conflict obviously affects the individuals concerned. The situation is likely to be very stressful for victims, resulting in their absence from work, possibly for months. For the company, if no effort is made to deal with conflict, it can spiral out of control and even lead to the breakdown of the business. Some interesting work with chief executives, CEOs, has uncovered some of the reasons why they may treat colleagues badly. Many CEOs combine two opposing characteristics: confidence, that is, the belief that they're capable of great achievements, with a high level of anxiety, a fear of missing targets, whether set by themselves or by the directors of the company. This combination can make them respond badly to anyone who questions their decisions. In a high-pressure work environment, such characteristics become problematic, and it's particularly difficult to tackle the situation where colleagues, managers and board members are all trying to achieve their own visions. When they can't agree on strategic issues and on where they see the business going, there are real problems. For managers at lower levels within the organisation, it might seem that an autocratic form of management, where the chief executive gives orders and everyone else has to obey, would see more conflict than others. Interestingly, though, a company with a more democratic business model can suffer more when uncertainty about who to report to leads to conflicting demands. Now I'll say a little about dealing with the type of conflict that has harmful effects. Of course, the ideal is to prevent it arising in the first place. A good manager at any level will make efforts to earn the respect of the people they work with, particularly those who report to them. That will involve politeness in all communications and treating them as equals who happen to have a different role within the organisation. Sometimes, of course, conflict does occur and can get out of hand. In such cases, the Human Resources Department often gets involved. However, if one of the parties in a conflict sees human resources as simply a mouthpiece for the chief executive, then an external mediator might be able to help. By talking to both sides and trying to find the truth of what's been happening, they can build a clear picture of the situation and give feedback that both sides will accept, precisely because they're independent.
Let's make a list of possible things we could ask about, then work out some sort of structure. For instance, we could interview some of the staff and find out whether the library has its own budget or if that's controlled by the local council.
And what their policies are. I know they don't allow food, but I'd love to find out what types of noise they ban. There always seems to be a lot of talking, but never music. I don't know if that's a policy or it just happens.
I've often wondered. Then there are things like how the library is affected by employment laws. I suppose there are rules about working hours, facilities for staff and so on.
Right. Then there are other issues relating to the design of the building and how customers use it, like what measures does the library take to ensure their safety? They'd need floor coverings that aren't slippery, and emergency exits, for instance. Oh, and another thing, there's the question of the kind of insurance the library needs to have, in case anyone gets injured.
Yes, that's something else to find out. You know something I've often wondered?
What's that?
Well, you know they've got an archive of local newspapers going back years. Well, next to it, they've got the diary of a well-known politician from the late 19th century. I wonder why it's there. Do you know what his connection was with this area?
No idea. Let's add it to our list of things to find out. Oh, I've just thought, you know, people might ask in the library about local organisations, like sports clubs. Well, I wonder if they keep a database, or whether they just look online.
Right. I quite fancy finding out what the differences are between a library that's open to the public and one that's part of a museum, for example. They must be very different.
Then something else I'd like to know is...
You see, you only get one bunch of bananas per tree, and it can take up to 3 years for a tree to bear fruit if you don't do anything special to it. But this period is greatly reduced with modern growing methods, particularly in plantations where you have perfect tropical conditions.
Right. So what are you looking at? 1 year? 2 years?
No, around 15 months in good conditions for a tree to produce a bunch of bananas. And once you've got your bunch, you cut the bunch and the plant down.
So how do the trees reproduce then?
Well, bananas are normally grown from suckers, which spring up around the parent plant, usually just above the plant. They tend to like to grow uphill, or at least that's the common wisdom.
So that's why banana plantations are usually on hillsides, is it?
Yeah, they grow best like that.
That's interesting.
If you plant them in rich soil and give them plenty of water at the beginning of summer, then they should be well advanced by the beginning of winter, when growth virtually stops. But in a country like England, they're hard to grow. Although you can grow them in a hothouse.
But in Australia, it's not difficult.
No, though even here, the growers put plastic bags around the bunches to protect them and keep them warm. If you go up to the banana growing districts, you'll see all these banana trees with plastic bags on them.
But how do they stop the bananas going bad before they reach the shops?
Well, the banana bunches are picked well before the fruit's ripe. Once you cut the bunch, the bananas stop growing, but they do continue to ripen. The interesting thing is that once one banana ripens, it gives off a gas which then helps all the others to ripen. So they pretty much all ripen within a few hours of each other.
Amazing. So do we export lots of bananas overseas to Europe and Asia, for instance?
Well, oddly enough, no. I believe New Zealand takes a small proportion of the crop, but otherwise, well, they're mostly grown for the domestic market, which is surprising when you think about it, because we grow an enormous number of bananas each year.
Yes, well, thank you for all that information. I'm sure the tutorial paper will go really well. You certainly seem to have done your research on the subject.
Let's hope so.
Tutorial group.
How long does that have to be?
Oh, about 25 minutes usually.
I have to talk for 25 minutes?
Yes, that's right. And then you have to write up your piece of work and give it to the lecturer to be marked.
Right. And is that all?
No. You also have to complete a 3,000-word essay on a topic.
Can I choose the topic?
Yes, usually you can.
Right. That shouldn't be too bad.
And in addition to that, there is an exam.
An exam? What sort of exam?
Well, it's an open book exam.
Does that mean I can have the textbook with me during the exam?
Yes, that's right.
And can you give me any idea about the content of the first year of economics, so that I can get into some reading?
Well, you'll be getting a reading list next week when lectures start. All the books are in the library.
Yes, but won't everyone else take them out as soon as they get the reading list too?
Well, yes, they might. But most of the important ones are held in closed reserve. That's a part of the library where you can go to read books, but you can't take them out of the building.
What did you call that section of the library?
Closed reserve. However, we do recommend that you buy the core books. You'll find them useful and you'll need them for the exam.
Yes, I suppose I will. But what is the focus of the course?
Well, the course at this university has a vocational focus. That is, a focus on preparing its graduates for work. So we're orientated very much towards employment.
Oh, so my chances of getting a job are good?
Well, provided you get good results.
Well, look, thanks for your time. You've been really helpful.
That's fine. See you next week, then.
Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 25.
Dr. Parkinson, global warming was the threat of the 1980s, but it seems to have fizzled out of people's minds. Why do you think that is?
Yes, in a way you're right. I think scientists have become occupied with the task of trying to find out whether it really is happening and, if so, whether it's caused by human activities.
A greenhouse effect is, after all, a natural phenomenon.
Yes, as we know, naturally occurring gases float above us, acting as insulators that prevent heat being radiated into space.
And the fear is that the insulation might get thicker.
Yes, and because of this, the Earth might get warmer.
The latest prediction we've heard is that the temperature will increase by about 1/3 of a degree every 10 years. What are your feelings?
Well, this prediction is difficult to make. You see, the global climate is the result of a web of influences. Who is to say that a simple action, such as adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, will not have several effects which might even cancel each other out?
And I understand that the prediction is hard to verify whatever.
Precisely.
Why is that?
Because the Earth's temperature surges and subsides naturally. In fact, the best way of detecting global temperature change is to measure the temperature of the oceans as accurately as possible.
And this avoids the sort of seasonal fluctuations of the temperature of landmass.
Yes, in fact, an understanding of the oceans is crucial to understanding how the global climate works. The ocean transports heat around the globe. It's like a great reservoir of heat. A tiny change in sea surface temperature denotes a huge change in the amount of heat it is storing. Before Parkinson goes on to explain, you will have another chance to look at questions 20.
Have a short and flat head, a snout that is short in length, big round eyes, long tree-climbing legs, a stubby tail, and small ears. And though some have called them ugly, they have the cutest face that looks like they're always smiling, just like a koala in Australia. Sloths spend most of the day sleeping, curling up in a tree notch or hanging from a branch with all four legs closed together, their heads tucked between their front legs. People seldom see them much move, even when they are awake. Only at feeding time, sloths move more slowly and carefully, hand over and through the treetops, searching for leaves, fruits, and twigs. They even mate and give birth while suspended from their long, curved claws. Sometimes a sloth will die, hanging upside down from a tree limb, and remain so after death, until they decompose or are forcibly removed. Why do sloths have such an unusual lifestyle? It's the strategy they evolved to survive as tree-dwelling plant eaters in a place with many predators. Most domestic herbivores, such as cattle, horse, and sheep, graze all day long. Because they feed on nutrient-poor vegetation, they must eat almost constantly. Sloths are also classified as herbivores, and their diets are also low in nutrition. But rather than munching all day long, they have become masters at conserving energy. As any athlete knows, maintaining muscle requires large quantities of food energy, far more than a sloth's vegetarian diet can provide. Sloths are relatively inactive and usually spend most of their day hanging upside down, so they can get by with half as much muscle mass as similar-sized mammals. Hence, they don't need to eat too much. In addition, because of heavy muscle, sloths weigh far less than other mammals. This makes it possible for them to climb on thin branches high in the tropical forest canopy, where they can more easily find food and avoid heftier predators. Keeping a high body temperature also takes energy. Sloths fulfill this need by maintaining a lower average body temperature than other mammals. Dogs, cats, horses, sheep and cows all have average body temperatures between about 100 and 103 Fahrenheit, but a sloth's average body temperature is about 93 degrees Fahrenheit. Equally important, a sloth's body temperature fluctuates with the surrounding temperature. Like snakes and frogs, which are cold-blooded creatures, a sloth's body temperature is highest on warm, sunny days and lowest at night and on rainy days. Sometimes, a sloth takes a sunbath in the morning, warmed up. Then, during the hottest times of day, it hides in the shade so it won't overheat. During a 24-hour period, a sloth's body temperature may vary as much as 10 degrees Fahrenheit. If the body temperature of a person, a cat, or a dog varies just 5 degrees Fahrenheit, it can be life-threatening. Because sloths have difficulty moving over land, they spend most of their time in the trees. They can get just about everything they need high above the forest floor, even water, which comes from eating juicy leaves and licking up drops of morning dew. Short bursts of feeding, followed by long periods of inactivity, make sloths less vulnerable to large raptors, such as harpy eagles, and other carnivores, such as ocelots. As long as sloths remain perfectly quiet and still, they're nearly impossible to detect. At feeding time, a sloth reaches out, grabs an overhead branch with its flexible feet, and tugs until the food is within reach of its long tongue. After pulling the vegetation into its mouth, the sloth clips the leaves with its hard, tough lips and slowly grinds them with a large, peg-like teeth. A sloth digests its food just as it does everything else, very slowly. People usually digest their food in about a day, but sloths can take about a month to finish the process. As soon as a sloth swallows a mouthful of pulverized plants, the bacteria in its stomach and intestines begin breaking down the food. It takes many hours for the bacteria to digest the tough plant material that makes up a sloth's diet. Only then can the sloth absorb the nutrients it needs to live and grow. So, do you have a new understanding about the slow but not lazy animal? Next week, we will talk about...
This is the end.